Listen, if you are beamed into 82 million households in the first 28 days of broadcasting, it's different from doing a big movie or anything else. You are ubiquitous.
Adjoa Andoh on being Bridgerton's Lady Danbury.
Of course, Your Majesty, but remember, a young lady cannot be a diamond until you anoint her as such.
What are your favourite Danbury lines?
I like it when she's having fun. I love it when she'd kick back and she'd have a fag on the go and a drink. I love that sort of just appetite and that, here I am. Any actor who wants to stay interested in the part they're playing, you have to put some blood into the writer's words.
From Bloomberg Weekend, this is the Mishal Husain Show. Bridgerton has been a global TV phenomenon for more than 6 years now. From the moment the first episode dropped right up to and through this year's season 4. And all the way through this tale of Regency England with its modern twists, there is one character who is not only very present, but who I think has a particular role for the viewer. Lady Danbury is kind of like the audience's guide, their friend even. And that is because of what a remarkable actor, Adjoa Andoh, has brought to the role. And even if you have never seen Bridgerton and might not be planning to, stay with me for this. Because she is an actor of tremendous depth and thought. The daughter of a Ghanaian father and an English mother, she honed her craft on stage and with Shakespeare, and since has ranged far and wide, including now with her own production company, which is called Swinging the Lens. We talk about all of this, but Bridgerton was fresh in my mind when we spoke, and I wanted to know how some of the Lady Danbury touches came about. The hats, the jewellery, the backstory of the character, her origins in Sierra Leone. I knew that Adjoa would have been embedded in the creative process. And that is what we get out of this, I think, an understanding of the care which an actor of her calibre takes with their material. So, to take us all to a magical place in midsummer, here's Adjoa Andoh in the studio with me. Adjoa, welcome.
Thank you.
Bridgerton's been part of your life for years now.
We started in 2019.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking for you to take us back to how it began, the audition? What was that like? And did you feel at that time that you were on the brink of something extraordinary?
No, it was a Friday afternoon. I had to nip to Shoreditch. That's where the casting director, Kelly, that's where her office was. You don't get a whole script. You only get the sides.
How much of the script? Just a passage, literally?
You literally get your character talking to somebody. I had a couple of pages worth because she was banging on.
Lady Danbury.
She was Danburying it. But it was really helpful because it gave me a real clear sense of who this personality was. And I read the sides at home and I thought, yes, I can do something with her. I think sometimes jobs come along and it's almost like the sum of many of your previous experiences as an actor or your life or whatever can feed in and you just go, oh, I know who this is. So it was a really pedestrian thing. I didn't meet any of the team from Netflix or Shondaland or anybody. I just went in with Kelly. We banged it out once and then I went, I've got a few more lines. And she was like, oh, do it again. We did it again. And then she had a train to catch and I went to see an exhibition.
And do you remember feeling hopeful and really willing this to happen? Or are you quite stoic about things like this? Because I'm always struck with actors, how resilient you have to be.
You have to be.
You must have had loads of no's in your life.
The majority will have been no's. And what I did think that day was, I love this character. I could do something with this character. I've given it my best shot. And all you can do is do your bit and then walk away and try to let it go. I say that. You never let it go.
You think about the ones that got away, the roles that got away.
Completely.
Even now?
Of course. I don't think that ever changes. It's like a lifetime's, self-flagellation.
But do you have a different level of confidence now that you have a role that's brought you global fame?
No. I did a movie with Morgan Freeman when he was saying, so what are you doing next? I don't think that changes. I remember Richard Bryars worrying about what his next job was going to be in his late 70s. So I just think it's part of the actor's tick. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who deal with it better than I do, but I don't.
It has been life-changing for you, though, I imagine.
It has. So there are lots of moving parts to it. So I would say it's on Netflix, which in 2019 felt different from talking about it in 2026. Shonda Rhimes is the queen of continuous, fabulous storytelling, and it's based on an internationally best-selling set of books by Julia Quinn. So those are three parts that mean you should have a good go with it.
You and I were both on stage with Shonda Rhimes in Edinburgh last year when she got the Edinburgh Fellowship, the inaugural one. And I was really struck by her describing Bridgerton as a workplace drama. I'd never thought of it that way. And the way she explained it was that this is a world where women only get power through marriage. And therefore, that world of getting married that's a marketplace. Essentially, that's their workplace.
Yeah, I just think that's a brilliant way of, and she does workplace dramas.
Yeah.
So here's another one. I think that's one of the things that I love most about what Danbury's role is in the show, that thing about going, it's not just about going, oh, he's quite cute, you're quite cute, maybe you can get, it's not. It's like, do you want to live? Do you want to have an income? Do you want to have some agency in your own life? Let's find you the person who will allow you all those things.
I guess that was always there in the script, the sides that you saw, but you must have also brought a lot of yourself to it. That character has grown with you.
Yeah. I think any actor who wants to stay interested in the part they're playing has to bring a deal of themselves to the character. Even if you're playing a serial killer or, whatever, you are truthful within your own narrative. I think there's a three-way thing that happens. There's the writer, there's the audience, and there's the actor. And you have to put some blood into the writer's words so that the audience can pump with their blood back at you. That's sort of what I feel about it.
When the new scripts for a new season come out and are shared with you, is there a table read where you start with Shonda Rhimes sitting there?
She will be present at the table read, absolutely.
And what is it like? You are literally seeing the script for the first time at that moment?
No, you'll have had it a couple of weeks in advance, probably.
And is that still nerve-wracking, that process of coming together again and starting on the script together?
It's nerve-wracking. It's also fun because you won't have seen each other for a bit. So they'll be all like, how's your plumbing going? Or, all that sort of stuff.
From that and
Did
then
you
into
get the cat neutered? But also the nature of our show is that there's a new energy most seasons. So you'll be seeing, how does this all work together now? And quite often, because, everything's filmed out of sequence, this may be the only time where you hear all the voices of a particular episode all together. So it gives you a really strong sense of the story.
And how much of that comes from Shonda? What does she say in moments like that?
She tends to just watch and observe and listen, and she may have a little welcome to say, but she's not giving you notes or any big wisdoms at that point. You hear from Shonda in the words on the page and in the shape of the narrative.
I was fascinated when we were together in Edinburgh on Queen Charlotte. And I don't know if she always works like this, but she said she hadn't written the last episodes when the first ones were being filmed. So sometimes she'd get feedback on how performance had gone and it would give her an idea of how it carries on.
Yeah.
Is that what it's like in the normal seasons of Bridgerton?
I think there is a mixture of having an overall arc and framework. But then there's space for creative play. You will get a whole script, but that's not what will end up on screen. Some of your favourite moments when you've been your most marvellous may end up on the cutting room floor, and you just have to accept that that's the process.
And do you not know until you see it
when you see it
on
you're
Netflix?
Like, I see. Okay, thank you. Or, you've done 75 million takes of a particular thing, and you don't know which take they're going to go with.
What are your favourite lines, Danbury lines, or Danburyisms?
I like it when she's having fun. I love it when she'd kick back and she'd have a fag on the go and a drink. I love that sort of just appetite and that, here I am. I love that quality to her. I love it when she gets a bit imperious with somebody who thinks they're the great I am. And I love it when she's doing her tough love sort of, come on now, come on, you can do this, come along, that sort of stuff.
And then in this season, we see a vulnerability when, mini spoiler here, everyone, but right at the beginning of this new season, she says to Queen Charlotte, I want to go back to my country, which is Sierra Leone.
Yeah. There's the regular 4 series of Bridgerton, and then there's the Queen Charlotte, the origin story. And in that, you get a little hint of of the life that Danbury was sort of raised to inhabit. So she sent over from Sierra Leone age 4 to be raised to be an English girl in the English style, in order to marry this much older man with whom she has 4 children, and then thankfully he dies.
Giving her freedom.
Blessed release. Giving her freedom, but also making her entirely vulnerable. And that's why she has this relationship with the Queen, where she says to the Queen, I've been in the court longer than you. We're both foreigners in this place. I will give you knowledge. You give me power. I need a title that's inheritable for my children for the foreseeable future. We need the income, and we need the status, and we need the land, and all those things that make us secure, because it's me and the kids. And I will give you all the runnings of how to do court. I will teach you how to strategize and how to survive and thrive in this space. So that's the deal. And she's done that happily all this time. And then in season 3, her brother turns up, and she's not very happy about it. But I think there's something about when the brother turns up, the tick starts going for her of, what was my family life before? You know, my grandson's 4.5. I've had tons of times with him. She left at 4. What was the first guy she saw? What was the food she ate? What were the smells? What was the language she heard? Who were the people? You know, where did she first take her little chubby leg steps? All of that. And I think she needs to know where she's from in order to go forward.
And you need to know this as well in order to play her in the moment.
Well, Shonda was really incredibly generous when she was doing the origin story. And she said Sierra Leone, and I was like, right, I'm doing some research. So I came back and I was like, okay, I found a general, female general, who advised the most significant tribe at that time in Sierra Leone, and her given name was Soma. So I said, can that be Danbury's given name, Soma? So I had little snippets and sniffs and flavours of who it might be. But it was really interesting.
And Shonda took that.
You know, Shonda is a hugely confident, creative person. And I think confident, creative people will go, oh, that's a useful idea. We'll put that in. And then she took it in the way that suited her to use it. But that information was there. And I love that.
Yeah. You shaped the look as well, didn't you? In the jewellery that she wears, it was you saying to the costume designer, I would like West African symbols, patterns to be part.
That's come latterly. I'd said, now that we know
her backstory,
I would love to have little hints of. So we've really used just 2 Adinkra symbols. One, Jinyame, which means except for God, fear nothing, which is her
mantra.
Keep it going. And then the other one, which is Sankofa. And the Sankofa symbol, it's a bird with a bead in its beak. And it's you have to go back to get the bead, put it in your beak, and then you go forward. So it's like you have to know your history in order to move forward. When we left Ghana, having visited my grandparents in 1976, my grandmother didn't say goodbye or why are you leaving or anything like that. She gave me a top with a great big Sankofa on it.
So the message was in the bird, the symbol of that bird.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating because there are probably a minority of people watching Bridgerton across the world who will spot this symbolism in the costume, but it's there if you know it.
Yes.
And perhaps people will know it and think, I wonder what that design comes from, and learn something in the process. That the detail is as authentic as possible and it will strike a chord with some and pass others by, and that's fine.
I love the granularity of stories, because I think that's where you get strongly grounded. But it's also those little nuggets are there for people to find or not find. So if I'm directing a show or I have any say over what happens, every prop, there must be a detail to it and it must have a connection to your character. Because, sometimes I will watch things and I'll be like, oh, what's that? And I will be interested in that. So any little nuggets that we can bung in there for people too.
You're a perfectionist.
I don't know. I think sometimes the interesting bit is in the failure and in the cracks.
Tell me about the contrast between seeing something like Bridgerton now and what it was like earlier in your career as an actor, when you're immersed in the classical canon and you've grown up with all these great works, Shakespeare, and then the reality of the acting world is a lot of these roles are not suitable for someone like you.
I think when I started, it was 1984, and the roles for actors of colour were not as widespread as they are now. Certainly if there'd been a costume drama, a romantic costume drama set in Regency England, moving on. You wouldn't have even thought you might be in it unless you were enslaved or maybe a servant, maybe.
Yeah. So your zone is like the gritty urban roles.
There's a lot of that. And then things shift. So recently there was a trend where if there was a therapist in a series, they would be somebody of colour, just in the, yes. Or, the ubiquitous judge. So you might have high status, but you have absolutely no narrative. Nobody cares who you are. So that would be a way of going, we are browning up the show here. But I would expect to have more roles that would be a fully fleshed out person on stage than on screen.
But in that period, does it do something to you inside when you know that you are not even in consideration for so many of the plum roles?
You have to make that equation, really. I did several things. I started a theatre company called Wild Iris with a friend of mine, and we did a lot of restoration comedies. We commissioned new work. We did tours, because in the end, at a certain point, you can sit in a corner and bleat about it, or you can get up and do something about it. So,
but ultimately, is it Bridgerton that you think has really moved the dial on that? Is it part of a continuum, or in its success, is it a massive milestone in its own right?
Listen, if you are beamed into 82 million households in the first 28 days of broadcasting, it's different from doing a big movie or anything else in that way. You are sort of ubiquitous in lots of places, and they can watch it on repeat. I think streaming has made the difference.
So your mother, English, your late father, Ghanaian.
Yeah.
What was it like in the 1960s in your early childhood as you grew up in the Cotswolds? Which is not a very diverse part of England.
No.
That is a massive euphemism.
Yeah. So we actually lived in Leeds until I was 4, which is still the place of my heart, I think. It's my football team. And lots of my mum's family were Yorkshire sheep farmers. We have cups going back to the 1700s.
What, trophies?
Trophies for sheep, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And my granddad was definitely a Yorkshireman first and Englishman second, and everybody else was...
That explains it, because I was thinking otherwise Leeds till you're 4 doesn't really explain the lifelong connectedness.
Yeah. And then we moved to the Cotswolds. So not only were we the only 3 black people in the village, me, my dad, my brother, but I also had a really booming Leeds accent as well. So we were like from planet hello, what on earth? But, my dad lived in that village till he died. And I still have friends that I went to school with who still live there, because lots of people, they don't move, they stay in those communities. And everybody remembers my mum because she taught at the secondary school. There was only one secondary school in that catchment area because we all lived in tiny villages, and you did walk to the next village, and your friends did ride over on their horses, which they kept in the field behind their house, because there was no public transport, and you did hitchhike with random strangers. And it was rough and tough, and also achingly beautiful.
That combination.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of racism growing up?
Of course. But when you're a kid, your world is the world as it is the world as it is. When kids say, we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. It's like what you grew up with. I had a really strong sense of, but that's not fair, which meant that it might be something about not being fair towards me. But I also became the person if someone was being bullied, I would wade in. And I think I'm probably still 4 as far as that's concerned, going, but what? Why? Why would you do that?
Yeah. Children have a very developed sense of justice.
Really.
And did you see your father treated differently? Did that register?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really common narrative, and I think for lots of immigrants from that period, my dad worked for a big company, and he would constantly be training people up who would then become his boss. And I think that's really painful. And it was really painful for him because he was a journalist in Ghana. He was the chief sub-editor on a national newspaper. So he was a super smart man. And I think it hurt him enormously.
And a talented man, talented musically, even though it was clearly not his profession.
Yes,
but it was something he
joy.
Loved, and it was therefore part of your life.
He was born in 1932 in Cape Coast, in what was still then the Gold Coast. His first memory of his mother was her singing and playing guitar to him, because she played guitar in a palm court orchestra. I have fabulous photos of her in the 1920s with the cloche hat and the little flapper dress. And So my dad played in folk bands. He would be schlepped around the country to, I can do I've been a wild rover for many years. All of that folk, and he loved that folk tradition. He played the mandolin and the flute and the guitar and the piano and the harmonium and all sorts of things. And my brother's a musician and my nephew's a music producer, so on it goes.
So hence the acting? Would that be fair that you thought
listen,
too will perform?
I'm the child of an immigrant father and a working class mother, and I was supposed to be a doctor, be a lawyer,
I do know.
You do know.
I do.
You do know.
In fact, both of those. I think I also moved from doctor to lawyer and then also disappointed them.
I surrendered in the end, and I did 2 years of a law degree, and then I couldn't stand it, and I left, and I just heard my dad, just finish it, which is exactly what I'd say to my kids if they bailed 2 years into a degree. And I think he was kind of waiting for me to go. He's always been waiting for me to go back and finish my degree.
But what made you then think, okay, I get the not wanting to be a lawyer. I totally relate to that. Yeah. But the actor part, how did that come in?
I just think it's what I liked.
What you liked watching?
No, I would direct plays with my friends. I directed Noel Coward's Blithe Spirit, age 7, never seen it. We just did it in someone's front room. We charged them. And there was a lot of net curtains and lights going on and off acting. So, I loved all the Enid Blyton Secret 7 and Famous 5. I loved a mystery. So I was always dressing up. I was always pretending. But you weren't allowed to do drama in my school unless you were doing A-levels because it wasn't considered a proper subject. So I did drama O-level in the 6th form. And by this time, my parents were getting divorced. I was fairly unhappy. And drama was my haven. And I went to see David Hare's play Plenty with Kate Nelligan. And it was a play about a young middle-class woman who works as a secretary in London, and she speaks fluent French. So she gets hoiked out and sent over to do special ops in France. And she supports the resistance, and she's marvellous at this. Of course, she falls in love with a very handsome Frenchman who's in the resistance. And then the war ends, and she comes back to London, and she's supposed to go back to being a secretary and put all that brilliance and all that skill that she's acquired back in a box and just be a nice lady doing her job. And she's devastated. And I remember seeing that play and in the cheap seats at Bristol Old Vic, just weeping and understanding two things. One, that there may be something in the world that you are brilliant at. You just have to find what it is. And the other thing was that this story had nothing to do with my life in the 70s in the Cotswolds. But some magic had happened in that space, that this story on stage could touch me profoundly and make me weep. And there was something about that. I just thought, I want a bit of that. But I didn't know how you would do it. In the Cotswolds, smart girls worked in the bank or maybe the building society or maybe even did the civil service exams. So I just didn't, how would one become an actor? It's like saying, well, I'm going to be a lion tamer or I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to go to the moon. It just wasn't a feasible thing. So it wasn't until I was doing the law degree and I joined a black women's group. And in those days, black meant of colour. So there were Turkish women and Asian women and African Caribbean, all sorts. And one of them was an actress from the San Francisco Meme Troupe, Deborah. And when I packed in my law degree, she just said, come and take my class. And I was like, okay. And then she got funding to do a play in London. Come and audition for my show. Okay. And I got the job. And so I sort of came to London and did the job and then thought, I'm in London, I'm going to be an actor. And then didn't work for a year, cleaned a lot of toilets, did all of that stuff. And then slowly, other black actresses started telling me about auditions, which at that time was an incredibly generous thing to do because...
It's a sisterhood. Sounds
the sisterhood, like. But also they were putting themselves potentially out of work by making me extra competition for the few jobs that were available.
Yeah, and because jobs would be very much, we're looking for a black actor or black actress for this.
Yes, as opposed to, there's this part, anyone could play it, maybe you. Yeah.
So it's a small pool at the time. Yeah. And I feel like you've not only done many different things with your life, from the cleaning toilets to the global fame, but also seen a lot of different periods, from the 60s in rural England to seeing punk, to seeing the 1980s in London and getting work at that time. So there is a story of change in Britain that comes alongside yours.
There is.
And political, right? Seeing politics as a part of life.
I think politics is a part of life. It has a huge impact on who we are and how we live. And, some of our experiences that being treated unfairly because of your race was nonsense. Or my mum being treated unfairly because she'd married a black man. I loved Andrew Young, the American senator. I used to clip newspaper articles and have them on my wall alongside my list of what were the new punk bands. And, so I'm interested in stuff. And I trained as a therapist. I've been a bereavement counsellor. I've done all sorts of things.
And I know you're involved with the Church of England today. So I have to ask you then about Britain today, because when the 2024 election happened, you were on TV on election night, looking forward to this new era with Labour in power and Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister. So how do you feel now? And are you worried about the rise of reform and its support?
I think it's inevitable. I think that there are a lot of people in this country who feel like nobody's listening to them and haven't been listening to them for a long time. And they are looking for people who will pay them attention. I think everybody ideally would like easy answers to their problems, and life is really complicated and complex. And I think it's very hard to live within the complexity and appeal to people.
And do you, when you're on tour in the States, promotional or otherwise, and then do you see the same themes, the same undercurrents, or do you think what's happening in the States is
I think it's happening all over the world. I think you can see a level of people concerned that they want to be able to put a circle around who they think are the people who should be there and the people who shouldn't be there. But I think you could see that if you went to South Africa today. You could see it in Ghana. You can see it here. You can certainly see it in the States. You can see it in Australia. I think there's a global conversation. And I think people are looking for solutions to allay their fears. And it may be that it comes out as an anti-immigration sentiment, but actually what it might be is I need to get an appointment for my daughter, or there are no school places available for my kid, or they've shut down the youth club and the street lights aren't working. And who will listen to me? Who will help me? Can somebody please help me? So I think there's a lot of that absolutely genuine anxiety, and I think it manifests in a variety of different ways.
Because we've talked a lot in this conversation about this great opening up, the difference that you've seen in your industry and in society in Britain. Is where we are now more like a cliff edge where things can very easily go backwards, and some of that acceptance of difference that many of us would have factored in and thought it's here to stay. This is progress. It's at risk.
I think you always have to be alert in the world. For love to triumph, you have to keep an eye all the time. And I think for me, I can't change the macro, but in the micro that I can do, the work I want to do will continue to be militantly about embracing people. So I don't ever look at anybody and go, you're a... I just think, what happened to you? Where's all your sweetness gone? And to me, that's about anybody. So I might be advocating in a context that's about class, or your industry. I toured to those mining and steelwork communities in the 80s. I was doing small scale socialist feminist touring, but we were in working men's clubs, and we were in canteens, and we were in school halls, and I saw communities absolutely collapsed in on themselves, with people no longer knowing who they were or what their role was or how to go forward. And we are all vibrating continuously with the collapse of industries that give communities a sense of who they are in the world. And so I see a lot of distress, and I don't dismiss it as people who are bigoted or blah, blah, blah. I see a lot of distress.
And am I right in thinking that you've spent time with migrant families in the US and the children of those families?
I've spent time with migrant families in Italy, in Poland.
Through your work with the International Rescue Committee.
Rescue Committee.
Yeah, we talked to David Miliband here not not long ago. But when you sit with those families, some of it was in the US, wasn't it?
Recently was in Atlanta.
And what were the stories you heard?
Gosh, I mean, often I go to places which are safe spaces for mothers and children. I hear so many stories from mothers who could be me or you or any mother watching or anybody who has care of children, just in circumstances that they have absolutely no control of, at their wits' end, and all they want to do is protect their children.
And when they talk to you, do some of them want to talk about Bridgerton?
Of course they do. Of course they do. My God, it's like, please, can we not just for a minute, let's not talk about bombing or food queues or, loss or misery. Let's talk about who makes your frocks. Are those wigs heavy? What's it like being in a corset? And I'm really happy to do all the frothy stories because we do the frothy stories and then we sit there and we cry together when they tell me about, I had to leave my husband and I haven't heard from him and I don't know what's going on, or my mother refused to leave the house and the town's been bombed. Some of the stories coming out of Ukraine. And I remember one woman saying to me, my husband's a doctor and I was just a mum with the kids and we had a nice life and da-da-da-da. And I didn't believe that the bombing would come to us until the next door house was bombed. And my husband has to stay to fight. And I just had to put the nappies in the car, put the kids in the car and drive. And I said, so you drove to Poland? She said, I was just driving. And I said, and did you know anyone? He goes, I didn't know anyone in Poland. I don't speak Polish. I'm not a refugee. I'm just the doctor's wife, and I had to leave my country. And I just think that's what it is. It's just human beings dealing with dreadful circumstances who could be us.
You are a director and you have your own production company as well as your acting. The production company is called
Swinging the
Lens, as in swinging the lens around from...
So it's two things for me. So it's swinging the lens as in, when you watch something and then there's a couple talking or something and then the maid brings in the tea. And I'm like, what's going on with that maid? Where's she going? Do her feet hurt? Does she like this job? How long she worked here? Who she left her kids with? And I'm like, can we just lens off you onto the maid, thank you. I'm interested in just opening up the number of stories that we tell. And also it sounds a bit like swinging the lead, which, means bunking off. But frankly, I do silly voices and put on silly clothes and somebody pays me and I pay my mortgage with it. So I'm like, woohoo, permanently swinging the lead. So it's got a bit of both those things in it.
And what does it mean in terms of the projects you have coming or the ones you really hope to do?
So we have a feature film in development, which is about an artist who has to flee London because he's fallen out with his dealer and he ends up living in this little boat community. But it's people who are living in, falling apart canal boats and living on a little island. And it's like they're the people that have got nowhere left to go. They've been pushed right to the margins. And it's about what happens when that community's island looks like it would be a fantastic marina. What happens to those gentrification? What happens to those people? How do we use art? Is it just, what are you talking about, using art against gentrification? So that's one thing.
And would you act in it and direct it?
I'd do a tiny bit in it. No, I'd produce it. We'd get a proper film director. Waste money on me directing it.
But you've been on so many sets. You could do it.
Maybe down the line I could.
Does that mean that this is part of your post-Bridgerton plan? Because I'm assuming you're going to be in Bridgerton for the duration, but we know from Shonda Rhimes
that nobody's telling me.
I can't imagine it without Lady Danbury, and I'm sure Shonda feels the same.
We'll see.
But it has to end one day. She said it's going to be the stories of the 8 children and maybe a few stories like Queen Charlotte on the side.
Yeah.
So is this the post-Bridgerton? Is this not the retirement plan, but the post-Bridgerton phase?
I'm hopefully doing it alongside. I just think life is short. And if you get the chance to grab it and shake it and have a go with it and, make it as interesting as you can, then do so. And storytelling is I have no transferable skills. So that's what I've got to do with it. And I love it. I like dressing up and telling stories like I did when I was a kid.
And long may you do so. Adjoa Andoh, thank you.
Thank you so much.